All right, so since it is now time, I think I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So Happy New Year, everyone, and we are very excited that you're joining the first Youth AI talk in 2021. Before introducing today's talk, I'd just like to give a quick overview of our previous talk and the upcoming talk. We've hosted 11 great talks since the kickoff of the Youth AI Speaker Series last August, covering important areas of AI such as cognitive AI, graphics AI, efficient AI, finance AI, as well as different implications of AI. Replays of these talks are all available in our Youth AI YouTube channel, and feel free to register on our website to learn more about our programs and get to know about our upcoming talks as soon as possible. On February 20th, 2021, our speaker, Professor Fei Fang from CMU, will share her work on integrating learning with computational game theory for addressing societal challenges in the age of AI. You are welcome to register and join this exciting talk. Dr. Fang's research lies in the field of artificial intelligence and multi-agent systems, focusing on integrating machine learning with game theory. Her work has been motivated by and applied to security, sustainability, and mobility domains, contributing to the theme of AI for social good. She was named in the Future of AI, AI's 10 to Watch by IEEE's Intelligent Systems. She's won a number of important awards at top AI conferences, and we're really excited to be hosting her on February 20th. Next, my co-host Melinda Xu will discuss the logistics of the talk.
Hi, my name is Melinda Xu, and before introducing Professor Furness, I'd like to briefly go over the logistics of the talk. Since we have an audience watching from our YouTube live stream as well as on Zoom, we'll be doing Q&A through a platform called Slido. So either go to the URL I've provided in the chat below, or you can go to Slido and enter event code 18889. So you feel free to submit questions throughout the talk, but we'll only be answering questions in a Q&A session at the very end of Professor Furness's talk, so be sure to stick around. Now let me introduce today's speaker, Dr. Tom Furness. We are very honored to have him here today to discuss his personal VR journey, the exciting projects he has worked on, and his vision for the future of VR in the age of AI. Dr. Furness is an American inventor, professor, entrepreneur, and virtual reality pioneer. He has contributed to 100 inventions and spun off 27 companies related to VR technology applications. Known for his contributions in developing human interface technology, Dr. Furness has earned the title Grandfather of Virtual Reality. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Augmented World Expo and the IEEE VGTC Virtual Reality Career Award for his lifetime contributions in pioneering the development of virtual reality and augmented reality technology and applications. He's the founder of Human Interface Technology Lab, the general manager and owner of the RATLab, Rocking and Thinking Laboratory, an engineering research and development company. He is also the founder of nonprofit Virtual World Society for extending virtual reality as a learning system for families. Let's give a warm welcome to Professor Furness.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Melinda, thanks for your introduction. Jeffrey, what a wonderful organization you have. And I am honored to be here, and especially given the repertoire you had already of your speakers and the ones coming up. Certainly, one of the things that you mentioned that I'm sort of labeled as the grandfather of virtual reality. Well, I think I am a grandfather of virtual reality. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I am really delighted to talk about my journey and perhaps where it leads in the future and its connection with artificial intelligence. So bear with me while I work on sharing my screen. I have some slides to show, and hope you will prevail with me while I get this going. Okay. All right, hopefully you can see my slides. We go?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, everything's good. Okay. Well, as it turns out, my wife just had her 78th birthday on January the 6th. Now, what a day for her to have a birthday. It'll be always remembered. I have a birthday coming up, my 78th birthday in April. But I wanted to start with, here I am as a 4-year-old kid in North Carolina. And, you know, it was always cool being a kid. I enjoyed being a kid. But the problem is I'm this old guy now. But one of the things that's a miracle is all I have to do is put on this headset and I become a kid again. Because what I can do is I can juggle on the moon. I've never really been able to juggle too well, but with 1/6 gravity, I can certainly do it a lot better. Or I could even juggle on Jupiter with a little more gravity to perfect it. I could walk at the speed of light. I could set my interpupillary distance when looking at galaxies at 10,000 light years to pull out the depth of the stars there. I could get a frog's eye view of the world and understand more about what the life must be like to be a frog. Or I could shrink myself to the size of a red blood cell and move through the body, enter into organs, see what happens there in terms of the exchange of oxygen and CO2. I could even walk on the surface of a soap bubble and experience the atomic structure that's going on underneath my feet. I could probably even with a companion be able to see through that person's eyes, what they're doing. I could even enter their body and they can see my hands inside of them. I could even guide them on what to do with my hands, or they could guide me what to do with my hands. For example, in guiding surgery. But one of the things that excites me is creating. Well, you know, this is something I've always felt like I wanted to do, is to be inside VR and creating in VR at the same time. What about going into a building before it's even constructed and see what it's like to look outside the window at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on December the 23rd? Or what if you could build a building without any blueprints, because the virtual building is there in augmented reality. And now what you do is replace the bits with matter. Or what if you could pilot a starship with your family? Let's say that all of you are gathered around in your living room, and one of you is in VR, the others are on your tablets or on your laptops, your smart TVs, but you are piloting a starship. And you're going at warp speed into other parts of the galaxy, searching for planets that will sustain life. And then going to a shuttlecraft and launching that shuttlecraft and going down to the surface of the planet and opening the door and walking on that planet. And with your probes, finding out, you know, is it a place where you could live? Or what if you wanted to be with your grandmother who's 3,000 miles away? And you wanted to take her on a trip to Machu Picchu, where she's always wanted to go, but you could go with her and be there with her as you roam around that area. Or she could even attend the birthday of your child and just like being there. Or what if you could actually deal with pain without taking any drugs? You know, opiates are really sort of toxic and they are addictive, but if you could do this by going into virtual reality and not noticing the pain, wouldn't that be wonderful? Or what if you could deal with the fear of heights or of spiders or even PTSD? Treat that using virtual reality with that headset on. Or maybe go into a virtual forest where you become a tree and you grow up and lift up your branches to receive the light. Your roots are going down to get nutrients from the soil and moisture. And oh, by the way, one of your friends is an earthworm. Another friend is a squirrel. Another friend is a bird. And together you begin to understand the ecology of a forest. Or what if you could actually go to an African village waiting for a food drop and be standing there with other people who are hungry and they're waiting for an airplane to fly over, for the food to drop. And you see they're rushing around while trying to gather up this food and how happy they are. Or maybe you could even be in a refugee camp and see what life is like there firsthand. Or what if you could be anywhere in the world? For example, you could actually put on your headset and go to Tokyo and interact with people in Tokyo, like we did in the Green Space Project in 1994. Or what if you could read a magic book? Now, the magic book, let's say that you're reading a story about Cinderella, and you see a picture of Cinderella's castle in the book, and you say, oh, that's really cool. Boy, I wish I could go there. And you put on your headset, and Cinderella's castle pops out of the book. And you're holding it, moving it around with your hands. And as you look in the window, you say, wow, there's some people inside. I want to go. And you flick a switch, and now you're inside the book. And you roam around in the castle. You try to discover new things there and maybe help people that are in trouble there, solving problems. And then you say, okay, I'm done. You flip the page, and then you have another world to explore. So let's look at that in action.
Welcome back. A new kind of reading material may hit store bookshelves soon.
Q13's Elizabeth Johnson shows us a magic book conjured up at the University of Washington.
This is a story about a Japanese princess, and she's crying here.
It looks like just a regular children's book, but this book can take you on a magic carpet ride of sorts.
When we were children, you know, you'd read books with your parents, and you always want to become part of the story. And so we thought about that, and we thought how we could make that happen.
Mark Billinghurst is on the team of researchers working on the Magic Book Project at the University of Washington's Human Interface Technology Lab.
So when I look at the pages through this headset, I see 3D virtual characters coming out of the pages.
And by simply flipping a switch, you can virtually leap into the scenes.
So here's the samurai, and the samurai is looking a little bit confused because he can't find his horse.
Of course, it's not really magic. The secret is special software written by the researchers and the black squares.
On the pages of the books, we have a picture with a black square around it. And then the way our software works is that the camera recognizes this picture and overlays virtual models on top of this picture.
You need a computer, camera, and virtual reality glasses. Mark says if you already have a PC, the rest should cost about $700. The technology does more than entertain kids.
Let's look behind us. There he is. So that's the evil ninja.
It can be used to show 3D how-to diagrams, to show an ant's eye view of a flower, or to help medical students.
We're working right now with the medical school to build an anatomy textbook so you can see a virtual 3D heart and fly inside the heart.
Elizabeth Johnson, Q13 reports.
Now that film, that newscast was done 20 years ago, by the way. And we started the very first augmented reality company. Called AR Toolworks that actually marketed the AR toolkit. Or what if you could actually create an atom and that way learn chemistry? And not only that, once you've done it, you never forget it. And when you compare yourself to other students or learning traditional ways, you find that even if you're making C's and D's in chemistry, you catch up with the smart kids. And then when you're tested 1 year later, you're better. Or what if you could learn in a Pythagorean theorem kingdom? You could learn some geometry there. Pythagorean theorem, one of which, and then use that to solve problems. And while you're there, you have a magic owl that lands on your shoulder and speaks to you and sort of guides you as you go through this world. And that owl is Archimedes. And Archimedes tells you, hey, you know, there's a person that's in that building, in that house, and the house is on fire. How can you rescue that person? And this is where you have to have a practical application, Pythagorean theorem, to do that. Or what if you're a middle school kid, maybe 11 or 12 years old, and you really want to build virtual worlds to teach your other student friends about light, momentum, scale, gravity?
today is start going over just some of the basics, how to add objects, how to manipulate them.
What was that like?
Oh, it's so real. Like, yeah. Whoa. Oh my gosh. That was so cool.
Well, the hang gliding, when you hit something, it was so realistic. I like fell over, like almost fell over twice.
Brian, what do you think? So you want to build some worlds?
Yes.
All right.
It'll be that ancient centuries old precious donut. It'll be worth a
It's
lot
a price gem of Donutlandia.
We made Donutlandia.
Donutlandia.
You can build things and you can practice your creativity levels. Like if you want to be an engineer, you can practice doing that.
Teeny sunglasses. I would almost not even go with like sunglasses. I'd even say it'd almost be like contacts or something.
Yeah.
That are like this
Like little tiny contact lenses that you can just pop into your eyes.
It is so fun. So what if you could even scan those images directly on the retina of the eye? You wouldn't have to worry about wearing a large headset to do that. Well, guess what? I can become a kid and do all of this because most, if not all of it, has already been done. And much, much more with virtual reality and augmented reality. Now, you ask the question, well, what is all of this? How is it different? Well, really, virtual reality comes from the term virtual imaging or virtual optics. It's the term in optical physics. And what it means is an image that appears to be at one location in space, but is not really there, but appears to be there. It's sort of like when you stand in front of a mirror and you see a reflection of yourself in the mirror. And you think that's what you look like. Well, actually, that's not what you look like. It's actually a mirror image of what you look like. But nevertheless, that's a virtual image. Now, we can take a small device that's creating an image, magnify it, and display it, collimate it so it appears at optical infinity, so that it looks like the real world. So the virtual world has always been there. Virtual images have always been there. We just haven't made them accessible. So where did all this technology come from? Well, I certainly can't take credit for all of this. It turns out there have been hundreds, even thousands of people I've worked with over the years. Over these 54 years, I've been working on virtual reality. They've been fantastic and good friends. And all of them are pioneers and leaders. And I'm just delighted I can be a part of this. Now, what differentiates me from these other folks is that I've been at it continuously for 54 years. There's no one on the earth that has done that, working on virtual reality. So that doesn't mean I know anything. It just means I've been around a long time. So let me tell you a little bit about my story getting there and where it came from. I started off in the mid-60s with 3 other guys. Actually, Mort Heilig was a little bit earlier than me. Mort was trying to provide a sensorama, or a way to experience movies using more senses than just vision and audition. He wanted to add 3D, he wanted to add movement and smell and things like that. So he worked on this idea of a sensorama. He was a filmmaker. Ivan Sutherland, the computer scientist, was really keen on how in the world can we work with computers in 3D instead of just in 2D. And he came up with ways to do that. And then there's Lieutenant Furness, who, a brand new commissioned officer in the US Air Force in 1966, began working on problems dealing with fighter airplanes. And so I'm going to sort of dive into that story a little bit so you understand a little more where my journey into VR took place. So really my first job I call sharpening the sword. My job was to design cockpits for fighter airplanes and advanced fighters in particular. You see an F-15 aircraft with its cockpit, really complex. You'd expect to have 300 switches, 75 displays, 11 switches on the control stick, 9 switches on the throttle, flying twice the speed of sound and pulling G's to the boundaries of consciousness in all these different attitudes. It's probably the busiest job on the earth. Now, one of the problems with this is that in the olden days, in order to aim the weapon systems, the sensor systems on the airplane, you had to pretty much aim the whole airplane. So aiming was a real problem. Furthermore, we had this real problem of not enough space in the cockpit to put displays that were large enough that actually matched the resolving capability of the human eye, especially when you're flying at night, low altitude, high speed, using forward-looking infrared sensors that were scanning the world at night, or low light level television, and trying to display those to the pilot. So one of the things that was clear that we needed to solve that problem. Then there was this sheer problem of the complexity of how many switches we had in the cockpit. It took a long time to train pilots. So I started working on these. And one of the first things I came up with is this idea for the virtual display, where you take a miniature picture, a miniature television picture tube. In this case, you magnify it, collimate, and project it into one eye. And now instead of having this small screen in the cockpit, you have a virtual image that's really big. Therefore, you can see it. Not only that, it would move around as you move your head around. But then there's the problem of aiming. And if you see something out in the world, how in the world do you communicate that to the aircraft aside from flying the aircraft in that direction? Well, I said, hey, the pilot can see it. Why don't we just instrument the helmet? And so here you see a head-mounted tracking system on the right, a helmet-mounted sight. 67 for the display, 69 for the tracking system. And then, of course, what if you put the two together? And now you had a system where you have this moving display in space, but you always knew where it was. And now you could put electronic information up on that and stabilize it. So as you move your head around, it moves in a particular way as if it's stable in space. So fast forward a number of years until we're talking about the 1986. And now I start working on the super cockpit, having developed a lot of the intervening technology required to create what we know today as virtual reality. The super cockpit is a cockpit that you wear. You put on a magic helmet, magic gloves, magic flight suit. You have three-dimensional information projected to your ears, to your eyes, and to your hands, tactile displays. When you plug in to the cockpit, and you get this three-dimensional display. So the idea is to take this complexity of a normal cockpit and transform it into something like this. It's a big picture. And this picture is what you'd see at night. And you could project it over the real world in 3D, and you see all this information that have to do with friendly aircraft, enemy aircraft, surface-to-air missile batteries, pathways in the sky, terrain information, threat envelopes, all of this stuff projected in 3D, so you get an instantaneous feeling for what's going on. And so this was an amazing transformation, and being able to use this idea that a picture is worth 1,000 words. 2 pictures worth 2,000 words. And this was quite a variation from what was happening before, and it's all projected in 3D. Now, in order to get this, to prove that this would work, we had to build some simulators that we'd fly on the ground before we went into the air. So you see here our Darth Vader simulator, what we call the visually coupled airborne system simulator. And in this display, you get 120-degree field of view, more than what we have with our normal VR today even. And with two 80-degree oculars, which are overlapped. So it has 3D in part, and it has the rest of the field of view to the side. And has 16-bit tracking system and speech input, binaural sound, eye tracking, all of these kinds of things. Now, let me show you a little video of that in operation that was done in a program called Top Gun and Beyond.
And inside what must be the zaniest helmet ever devised, this is what the pilot sees. Like some fantastic arcade game of the future, the pilot flies through a world that the computer has devised for him, based upon the known characteristics of the F-15 and its potential adversaries. In this Tron-like 3D arena, he can take off and land, navigate to preset coordinates, and he can fire his guns if need be, there is still a gun, and activate his missiles, all by voice control.
Selected.
The engineers readily admit that these futuristic concepts are likely to remain impractical for at least the next 8 to 10 years. And clearly, no pilot could be persuaded to dogfight pulling G's with a ridiculous contraption like this on his head. But it is only experimental, and advances in miniaturizing the high-resolution TV screens that will project the graphic displays onto the inside of the visor have already led to the development of a new and much more feasible flying helmet currently under test. But even more unusual ideas are being developed at Wright-Patterson. This man is switching switches simply by looking at them. Using infrared lasers, sensors in his helmet read his eye position from moment to moment so that computers can identify the switch he's looking at. And down the corridor, the tiny magnetic fields given off by the brain activity of this research volunteer are being analyzed by a superconducting device known simply as SQUID. Controlling fighter aircraft systems simply by thinking is, some researchers claim, no more than 30 years away.
Okay, it's interesting that that particular video was made in 1985. So you can project forward 30 years to find out if we should be doing that. Well, it turns out we are. I flew in the fighter airplanes. I was testing some of this equipment. I know how it would do and how it transformed this operator who had so much information to deal with. It was remarkable. Now, one of the things I want to mention here is about artificial intelligence. It turns out in the super cockpit, we had a box in there, a magic box, called the Pilot Intent Inference Engine. And the whole idea is that this was like R2-D2 sitting back behind you. And R2-D2 was watching what you were doing and inferring what you're trying to get accomplished, looking at all the sensor information coming in and saying, this is what we're trying to do, and would basically organize and present the information in the direction in space that the pilot needed at the time in order to perform the function. Now, this was all theoretical at the time, but that was a major part of our super cockpit program. And now we see a lot of those things actually existing in the F-35 Lightning. And you see the headset that's actually done there. So basically that early work I was doing ended up in the operational inventory. So let me tell you what happened. After that, I was asked sort of 1985, 86 time period, or actually before, it was actually 84. I was asked by a general at the Pentagon if I would do a press conference of the work we're doing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so I did. I wrote a press release and held a press conference. CBS Evening News comes in, Dan Rather's crowd with David Martin, a Pentagon correspondent, and they spend 2 days taping what I'm doing in this super cockpit with a virtual coupled airborne system simulator. And so I ended up on the evening news. As a result of that, I started getting all these phone calls. A mother called me and says, my child has cerebral palsy. Is there anything you can do with that child to help my child with that technology? Surgeons were calling me. There was a thoracic surgeon who said, I can't navigate my way around. My map is a CT scan on a light box on the wall. Is there any way that you can project that into the patient so I can see it? Or we had another surgeon that said, I want to be on the inside looking out. Can you put my eyes in the patient anyway? Firefighting companies were calling saying, is there a way that you can help us with firefighters who are going and burning buildings that's full of smoke? They don't know if there are any people in the building. They don't know where the other firefighters are. Can we see through the smoke? And of course, the fire chief is on the outside of the building with a radio and doesn't know anything. So as it turns out, I was getting 3 or 4 phone calls a week from people that had watched these programs. And my answer to them was, well, yeah, you could do that. As a matter of fact, that'd be sort of easy to do compared with what I wanted to do. So I decided, it's time to move this out of the military and to try to develop applications for it that went beyond that, especially in education and medicine and things like that. So I wrote up a plan. The University of Washington hired me to come to Seattle to start the HIT lab, the Human Interface Technology Lab. So this is where I began another part of my journey to beat my sword into a plowshare. And so started the lab in 1989, moving to Seattle, and it was fantastic. My mandate was basically to invent and start companies. With an ecumenical program across the university, I had students from all of engineering, mechanical, electrical, bio, industrial, civil, computer science and engineering, we didn't have chemical engineering, I don't believe, but art, drama, music, oceans and fisheries, medical school, dental school, nursing school, occupational health and therapy, the College of Architecture, psychology, geography. Anyhow, we had students from all of these different disciplines. This is so important, diversity. And what I would do is create these clusters of 4 students. There would be one student that had psychology, working on a psychology PhD. Another one is working on a degree in EE. Another one who is oceans and fisheries, and another one's drama. And what happened is, it was amazing. They all had different perspectives. I would seed them with a problem, and I would get 3 or 4 patents a week from these students. That's where those 27 companies came from. And those companies, 2 are traded on NASDAQ, a few are coming along, market cap of $12 billion. And that was done with students. So lots of cool things happening in my second job. Virtual Vision, 1994, we created this device. I don't know if you can see it here, but this is actually the very first consumer virtual display. And what you'd be able to do is put this on and you see a 1 meter screen at 3 meters away. But that really wasn't good enough. I wanted to build a device that would actually scan directly on the retina. So this is where the virtual retina display came from, that you see there in the bottom left, an optical bench you see in the middle. And then one of my students, Mark Billinghurst, working on a PhD in electrical engineering, we worked on this idea of augmented reality, video-based, where you basically would take objects and track it with 3D, and then you'd read with computer vision the nature of that object and be able to paste other images from a library on top of it. So you see the little girl wearing a headset, which has a TV camera mounted on it, and the little ninja that was shown in that other video that I showed you before, it's sort of super glued onto that card. This became the very first augmented reality company that was out there. Then applications of this technology. In 1994, we spanned the Pacific. We had 2 people in Seattle, 2 people in Tokyo in the same virtual world interacting in 3D. 1998, with the Museum of Flight, we were working on this Starship project. In 96, we actually took VR out to schools in Seattle and in Washington State and Nebraska. We had about 3,000 kids that had a chance to experience VR. 350 were involved in building virtual worlds back in 96. We also, as part of that display I just showed you, the virtual vision display, we started finding out that dentists were buying these systems to put on their patients while they're inflicting pain on them. And that led us to a whole new research area in pain, using virtual reality as a non-analgesic for pain. And of course, recently we've been working at the Robert Eaglestaff Middle School with the kids developing virtual worlds to teach others, along with 7 other projects we've had funded by NSF and others to explore the incredible efficacy of virtual reality for education and training. So, what are the lessons that I've learned during this journey? Well, over these 54 years, the main thing that makes me become a kid is I experience wonder again in an unprecedented way. I can be anywhere, anytime, any size, and I will never forget it. That's one of the things we've discovered. And the reason I never forget it is because virtual reality puts a place inside of you by putting you in a place. And another thing I can do is look through other people's eyes to see the way that they see the world. It is so fun. As a matter of fact, it's a holy moment when you put a headset onto a person for the first time. So it transforms the way we see, hear, touch, and remember. Now, with that comes an amazing responsibility. In a way, it's sort of like splitting the atom. We're unleashing an enormous amount of energy. The question is, how do we use that energy? Just like with splitting the atom, we can blow up the world, or we have limitless power. So how are we going to use it? And this is something I've been concerned about for some time, because this power of immersion is sort of like writing on the brain with permanent ink. And we need to be responsible what we write on the brain with this technology, because it's like nothing else we've had before in terms of a medium of communicating bandwidth to the brain, to and from the brain. So one of the things I did in '93 actually is started the Virtual World Society. It was reincarnated again here in 2014. The whole idea of the Virtual World Society is to basically develop the humanitarian uses of this technology. We want to unlock minds and link hearts to lift humanity and be sort of this conscience, this heartbeat of virtual reality. Now, we have great aspirations. We want to be like the Peace Corps of virtual reality, with boots on the ground, going out there into the world and using this technology to help people. We want to become the National Geographic Society of VR. Now, you know, the National Geographic Society is trying to bring the outside world to inside of us so that we grow and appreciate that. Well, what we're trying to do is take the inside out. We're trying to spark imagination and creativity and take what can come out of the human side. The super glue of humans is really imagination, and how we can take that and get it out and communicate it to others. And we want to do that with like the PBS of VR and Doctors Without Borders. Now, in order to do this, we have to create an ecosystem of 5 communities. Certainly the industry, it's creating the technology, and we're interested in, of course, the world out there, the community, and all of the challenges that we have there. And what do we do in between to solve these problems in the world? Well, we believe that the problems are going to be solved by individuals, and individuals, the key place of the classroom of the future is in the home. Now, this doesn't negate the schools. The schools are an important part of that, interacting with the home. And then, of course, you see on the bottom right, the independent developers. There are gazillions of them who want to build virtual worlds and want to lift humanity. And we want to bring them into the picture and give them a chance to do this, to create experiences of wonder. Now, we will continue to work with the schools, making learning fun. We have a great track record in that. And so not only us, but the rest of the VR communities is really keen on that. And also in industry for training of workers. We also continue to work on the Make-A-Wish Foundation. We have been successful in helping kids that would normally not be able to, or they're critically ill. They, in many cases, wouldn't be able to leave the hospital, but give them a chance to have a wish, their greatest wish. And they actually help us create what experience they'd like to have. We just finished one with a little boy named Price, who helped slay some really bad bad robots who were trying to drain Seattle from the natural energy. Now, the real project, the big one that we want to do, is the learning living room. How do we take the best classroom in the world, which you've always had, which is in our home? How do we really make this a lifelong learning experience for families? Not only for the kids, not only for the parents, but for the grandparents, so that it becomes a place where families not only have fun, but they learn together. Now, no one's really addressing this systematically. Certainly they're addressing problems in the school and problems in work, but not in the home. There's more technology in homes right now than we'll ever have in schools. And the other thing that happens with schools is, here we have like that little Tommy Furness that was going out and play in the sandbox. What happens when Tommy gets to school is he sits in the chair all day and is like a receptacle for things to be poured in. But there's very little opportunity to explore and to develop and continue to develop that imagination and the creativity and have expressions for it, because what we do today is we give tests, and these standardized tests tells you if you're smart or not. I've never seen such a thing as a dumb kid. What happens is to put kids into categories, builds fences around them and silos. We got to get out of that. And imagination, again, is the super glue and the super power that we have to bring everything together, I believe. So we're starting a grand experiment. This experiment will involve thousands of families in the end, but we're starting off with 100 up to 500 families that we'll equip with VR. We will feed them world building tools and content that are made by those thousands of members we have of the Virtual World Society in order to help them learn in an experiential way. And these are worlds of wonder. We also provide mentorship and provide projects for them to work on that have to do with these global issues like the pandemic and those 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations has generated. Families can do that. Kids can do that. Parents, grandparents, all working together in that particular environment. In the end, we'd like to get 10 million families to become subscribers of the Virtual World Society for having these kinds of opportunities for $100 a year. If you do the maths, you find out that's $1 billion. With $1 billion, what we can do to change the world. That's what we're trying to do in the Virtual World Society. Now, what about the future? What's going to happen in the future? And this is where AI comes in quite a bit. It's in all of this stuff already. And we've been using AI in all kinds of different machine learning environments. And as you know, they're being used in natural language interpretation, things like that. But let me mention the frontiers, and especially for the Youth AI Lab. These are things that are going to be fun to get into. Training our senses. It turns out humans have amazing sensory capability, but we're not using them. Matter of fact, in vision, we're pretty much, since we're focusing on screens all the time, we're pretty much are just concentrating on very little of our visual field. And one of the examples of that is when the coach of the Huskies comes to my lab and says, "Tom, can you help me teach my quarterbacks to see?" Because they don't see the flankers coming in from the side to nail them. They said they aren't seeing. So it turns out our peripheral vision is out there. We just don't use it. How we can train the use of it. And even beyond what we bring into awareness, our far peripheral retina, we're discovering in a grant from the National Science Foundation, looking at the far peripheral retina. It's amazing how that's coupling to our limbic system. Even we're aware, even though we're not aware, we can say what's back there. And also potentially a pathway into our unconscious. Our skin is the largest organ of our body. We aren't necessarily using that as a means of getting bandwidth to and from the brain. Also our ears and our hands, all of these can be trained, our sensory capabilities that we're not using, but we already have. We can start healing from the inside out. You know, pretty much medicine, the practice of medicine has been the opposite. It's going from the outside in. So you cut on people and you put new parts in, things like that. But what if you could heal from the inside out? We saw the beginnings of that with the pain, how we could treat pain without using opiates. We can do more than that. We can deal with the issue of stress. We can also launch inside AI robots, nano robots that actually search out and find bad things in the body and filter them out. And so we can see this combination of nanotechnology with VR and AI working together to do that. Higher dimensionality. It turns out that physicists, to try to explain superstring theory, have to use 11 dimensions. Well, the problem is we don't think very well outside 3 dimensions. 4 dimensions that we add in time, but things are happening around us that can't be explained, especially in quantum physics, and that we don't understand because we cannot conceive of them, but we can. When we think about all these sensory modalities, the spatial inputs that we have with the skin, with the ears, and with the eyes, we can begin to actually provide a display, combination, a multimodal display, combining these things. So we begin to understand higher dimensionality, how things work, and discover those invisible linkages that seem to be there. In the mitochondria of the brain, where you have structural size that support quantum tunneling, how that may even interact with entanglement to also quantum effects, quantum tunneling in other life forms, including leaves and plants and things like that. So we're really connected in ways that we can't even conceive, but we want to be able to see those and understand them so that we can grow and solve the problems of our age. Consciousness is the big one. With the modeling that we can get with the neural net approach to artificial intelligence, we can begin to understand the patterns in the brain that are associated with other behaviors. Some of those behaviors that we can actually control and input with virtual reality devices. And then finally, communicating with other species. It turns out that octopuses are pretty smart. They actually have 9 brains. 8 brains for each arm, 1 brain for each arm, and then a central brain located between the eyes. They're about equivalent to a dog, a little bit less than a dog in terms of intelligence, maybe a 1.5-year-old child. So what if we could communicate with octopuses? So this is actually a project that we're working on. And we want to communicate with octopuses by our becoming a virtual octopus, and actually surrounding by a cave system around an aquarium of a living octopus, like a giant Pacific octopus, and be able to, inside that octopus, to see the way the octopus sees and be able to negotiate through things, actually see if we can communicate by teaching the living octopus various things. So I'm going to give you some homework. This is your homework assignment. There are 4 pieces of this homework assignment. First is, number 1 is to attend a fireside chat coming up on this coming Thursday, January the 14th at 1 p.m. It's a Virtual World Society fireside chat where we will have Alvin Graylin, who's the president of HTC in China. He actually was one of my former students. And Alvin is an amazing person in terms of his experience and his forecasts of what we can see in the future with virtual reality, with augmented reality, and these advanced concepts and involving artificial intelligence. The number 2 one is to watch the last lecture. My friend Randy Pausch died in 2008, but he gave this lecture just before he died about how to achieve your childhood dreams. Doesn't have anything to do with computer science. It's about how to achieve your childhood dreams. It's had over 20 million views. It's amazing. In that last lecture, he talks about the day we met for the first time. And you need to watch that. If there's any one YouTube video you watch the last lecture. You need to support, number 3, the AI community through the youth. I am so impressed with Jeffrey and Malia and other youth students who are working with them. They're amazing. And they are our future. And we need to do everything we can to support that initiative that's coming from the youth, not only in AI, but in other communities. The Younga program and Youth Take Over the United Nations General Assembly. These kind of programs. And then finally, join the Virtual World Society. It's free. Join it and help us build these worlds that will bring wonder and imagination to the children and the adults of the world. My final advice to the youth now is that always tell the truth. Be honest. If you don't know, say that. And be willing to accept the consequences of telling the truth and doing what's right. Number 2 is draw a big circle. Embrace diversity, just like those kids in those really groups where they had such a difference in their disciplines, but it was magic when they came together, and having those different perspectives helps with that. Work on noble causes. Work on things that really make a difference. Games of violence, yeah, you can make some money doing that, but really does it lift humanity? You need to be inspired and passionate about the work you're doing and how it can lead to making life better for everyone and helping everyone to achieve their goals and their self-actualization. And then finally, have fun doing this. Have lots of fun. If you're not having fun, maybe you ought to think about something else. And the whole idea is to never work a day in your life. So thank you very much. Happy to entertain some questions. Sorry, I've gone over a little bit, but you take it over, Melinda. Any questions you might have, and I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much to Dr. Furness for giving such an invigorating and insightful talk, really, about how the future of VR is really going to unfold. I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Jeffrey, to ask the first question.
All right, so looking on Slido, I see the first question that I see is fairly broad, so this might be a long answer for you, but I'm certain this is probably a question you get a lot. Is VR good for you? It's broad, but I think there's a lot of aspects to it that our audience might want to hear you address.
Okay, that's really a great question. Is VR good for you? Yes and no. Just like, is TV good for you? Yes or no. Or having a computer good for you? Yes or no. You know, it all depends upon how we use it. Certainly, there are some concerns I have about the quality of the hardware. We aren't there yet in terms of matching the capability the way the eyes really work, especially most of the VR displays do have no ability to manipulate accommodative cues that go along with the stereographic cues. But those will get better and it will improve. We are probably good enough to get started using these kinds of things. The second thing has to do with the content, the experiences you have. Because you're writing on the brain with permanent ink, you're never going to forget the experience you're having. So if you're killing people up close and personal, you're not going to forget that. That's bad. On the other hand, if you're able to experience worlds of wonder, where you can shrink yourself to the size of a blood cell and go inside the body to learn that way, or you can walk at the speed of light, or you can have these new educational content where you're building things and learning about physics in the process of doing that, or history, then it's good. So, you know, technology is basically amoral, and we get intoxicated by it. Technology can be intoxicated because we use it to make gadgets that don't necessarily do anything that help people in the end. But they are tools of our future. And we wouldn't be as far as we are today without the Industrial Revolution, without the information age, all of these things. So that's why we need to be responsible. We need, as the intelligentsia, people involved with technology and with content, we need to be responsible, realizing that what we're doing in communicating through these media is really powerful. And so with that comes a lot of responsibility to make it right.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of things in this world that have that sort of balance as well, where it can be used for bad or used for good. It all depends on the intention behind it. Another question in Slido is that, what is something that you would have told yourself when you were younger?
Oh, great question. I love it. I guess there are several things I'd say to myself. One is not to worry so much. That things tend to work out better than you think. When you think you're going in a direction, it's important to be moving, going in a direction. But you may trip over a few things. And actually, it's what you trip over in the process of going in one direction to become interesting. Like one of the things that happened with the virtual retinal display I was showing you. We're scanning an image directly on the retina. There's a guy that came in our lab who was blind in one eye and looked into that virtual retinal display and could see with it. And we said, wow, that's sort of a, we didn't know what was going on until we found out that we're actually getting through into the retina, ways of light into the retina that were obscured by other problems that were in these eyes. And so that took us off in an entirely different direction with the virtual retinal display. I've also had setbacks. One of the big setbacks I had was I didn't make it to the Air Force Academy. I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. I wanted to become a pilot, jet pilot, and then become an astronaut. And I couldn't read the eye chart well enough to make it to the Air Force Academy. That was a gift in disguise. Because as it turns out, I didn't become an astronaut. And I was an astronaut in virtual space because I was actually some of the technology in the Hubble Space Telescope repair simulator was my technology. And I went down there and flew it. So I was in the virtual space shuttle. I was looking up at the Earth because the shuttle was flying upside down. And I was looking at the sun and the moon while I was there repairing the Hubble Space Telescope. And I realized, I actually became an astronaut in virtual space with the technology I invented. If I had read that line one lower, that may not have happened. So, it's not to worry and to take advantage of these opportunities that come up. Even there is no such thing as failure. The only thing that's failure is failure to try. So you learn way more from failures than you ever do from successes. So that's what I would say. I would tell myself today not to worry, try, take risk, try, and you'll be better for it. The nursing home is nursing homes today are full of people who regret not what they did, but what they didn't do. So I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
All right, now I'm looking at Slido again, and someone in the audience is asking about your experience in actually quantifying the inferential learning obtained with VR. Is there any sorts of really concrete ways you've seen improvements over traditional learning?
Okay, that's a very good question. Again, these are great questions. One of the things, of course, is how do you quantify learning? And there are several ways to do that, certainly, with standardized tests and, how much did you retain or how do you solve problems? Certainly, that's where the gamification of some of the learning is really useful, because the way you measure whether a person is learning is, do they advance to another level in the game that they're playing? And one of my PhD students, Tron Nielsen, actually worked on a way to gamify teaching anatomy to medical students, and using an ontology that was basically a fusion of all the data they had of a virtual human. And this would actually be customized on the fly in real time for each of these medical students. And so it would platform them, and you could tell where they're having problems. What aren't they learning by what they're doing in this particular simulation? And so I believe that that's certainly building into these experiences, a hands-on experience, you can advance. And the whole idea is not to throw out someone, because everyone finishes the game in the end. But everyone has different learning styles, so everyone succeeds. But you can see the progress that people are making as they go up the ladder. Now, one other thing we discovered as a great way to measure that is what we did with a project at Garfield High School, where we worked with the chemistry department, where students were learning chemistry, and we compared 3 treatments, 3 learning approaches, teaching approaches. One was the standard book in Blackboard. One was a computer-aided tutorial. And the third was a VR experience where you're shrunk down the size of an atom and you actually build atoms. They were concerned about electron orbitals. Apparently this was difficult for the students to comprehend how that works, valence electrons and things like that. So what happened is they had the students divided up into these 3 groups, and they wanted to measure their performance at this particular module of electron orbitals. And when they tested them at the end, the students that were making A's in class didn't make any difference. All 3 treatments worked out the same. But those students who were making C's and D's and even flunking chemistry, the ones who did it in VR, that involved their whole body in this learning experience, caught up with the smart kids. And when we tested them a year later, they were better. So it wasn't a problem that they weren't smart. It was the problem the pedagogy was wrong for that particular student. And so what we could do is, again, with this new kind of learning environment, we can measure retention. Retention is one of the powers of VR. And because once you've been in that place, you remember it as a place. It's like the difference of watching a TV program about Disneyland versus going to Disneyland. You're never going to forget going to Disneyland. So yeah, those are different metrics, and we can embed them in the experiences that people have, how they behave with their movement, what they look at, or what they say. So it's a much better way to incrementally gauge. And then, by the way, you can feed that back, as Tron did in his learning experience for medical students, and use that to make sure that the student gets to that particular piece of information, which is important when you're learning anatomy as a medical student.
Thank you. And so another person, one very popular question is, so the person says they found your early VR projects that you described very interesting, and they were wondering if you would happen to know where they could find the video you showed of Project Paradigm.
Of which project?
Project Paradigm. Peridium or Paradigm.
Oh, what, the Starship project? Maybe I'm not sure which one, but yes, we can have them send me email, and I will make available all that material. There's a Starship project. I don't know if that was it, but
So I think what you can do is, if you're willing to, you can put your email in the chat, and that way the participants can. And I know you did put it on a slide, but it might be easier if you have it there in the chat for them. And I'm looking at the next two questions on Slido, and I'm going to kind of group these together. So the first question is on the sort of the impact of VR on the eyes, and someone's concerned about nearsighted or becoming nearsighted or farsighted if you use VR/AR for an extensive amount of time. And the second question is how VR can be used to treat physical pain and mental stress. So I think two health-related questions.
Okay, well, let me answer the first question. As it turns out that the optics in most of the devices we have today, most of the VR devices, like there's a Quest, are collimating optics, which means that all the pixels that are on the screens in these devices are collimated optical infinity. So that means that you're looking at these in a distance. Now, if you are farsighted, you're in luck. If you're nearsighted, you're not necessarily in luck, and you need to wear some glasses, like I do. I wear my varifocal glasses when I have my headset on, and it works fine. The problem is that, so it really isn't as much of an issue except your ability to focus on those images. It won't hurt you any. Although there is a disconnect between the stereographic cues and the accommodative cues, because as things get closer, as you want the pixels to appear to be closer, or your objects will come closer with stereographic cues between the two eyes. But the single eye, each eye by themselves, also focuses the lens of the eye, and you want that to match. And right now, all the pixels are at optical infinity, so the pixels are going to be out in the distance, whereas they're going to be displayed in the way they're up close. So there is a disconnect there. But those kind of problems can be solved eventually with, and as a matter of fact, they were in my patent for the virtual retinal display, which was patented in 1995, which is expired in 2015, but it's there for anybody to use now, of how to do that and modulate the light wave front of coherent light that's scanning on the retina. Okay, so that was the first question. Really, there's nearsighted, you probably are going to need to use some glasses when you're in a headset. Now, the second one had to do with about health. What happens, we found, and again, we tripped over this by accident. We found that when I showed you this device, which was the Virtual Vision personal eyewear display, was one of my patents back in 92, 93 time period. And we started a company called Virtual Vision, and we were making commercial versions of this. And we found out that it was too expensive for most people to buy as consumers. But dentists started buying these things like crazy. And what would happen is we inquired about what are they doing with them. And what they were doing is when a patient came into their office, they would put one of these headsets on them and they would pick out a movie they wanted to watch. And so here they were in the chair watching the movie. The dentist said it was wonderful. Patients didn't complain anymore, that they were able to enjoy this movie while the dentists are inflicting pain on them, and not so much pain. But nevertheless, the dentist said it was sort of unbelievable. They weren't getting any complaints or things like that. And they said they really did create another problem. Well, now they can't get the patients to leave because they say, I can't leave now. This is the good part, But even more remarkable is what happened with the kids, with little ones, because this was now hooked up to Nintendo. And they were playing Nintendo while they were watching this. And they would go home after that experience and ask their mothers, when can they go back to the dentist again in order to put on those glasses so they could play the game? Now, when did a kid ever ask to go back to the dentist again? Now, we were noticing, talking to these dentists, the dentist said they don't seem to notice any pain. And so we then did a project at Children's Hospital, Seattle Children's Hospital, to find out what's going on. And here were kids who have leukemia, and they were doing a procedure where they put a needle into the hip to draw out bone marrow to determine how the chemotherapy is working. Usually this is a really painful procedure. It causes the kids to scream because it's so painful. And what happened is the kid was sort of bent over and had the headset on and playing Nintendo. The doctor would put the needle in, the kid would sort of make an oomph and keep playing. And the nurses and doctors would look at each other because usually the patients would be screaming. It was so painful. That led us to working with burn victims, Harborview Burn Center, where these people are severely burned. They're in pain all the time. You can control some of the pain, rest pain, when they're just sort of lying in a bed using opiates, morphine, things like that. But that's bad stuff. It's toxic, it's addictive, not good. And so you can't stay on it very long, but that's the way they control the pain. But when they go in for wound care, like they soak the patient in a vat of water and then slough off the dead skin, it's so painful. And or they do a physical therapy, or they are removing staples from a skin graft. All of those procedures make the pain shoot through the roof. You can't dose the patient with enough morphine to keep the pain from going to max. And so you do the same thing with those patients with a headset on. And mind you, they're not seeing anything but the virtual world. And they're going in a snow world. My colleague Hunter Hoffman pioneered this work many years ago. And what happened is you'd ask them what their pain index is, and they said, well, when are you going to start? When in fact you'd finished the procedure, and it didn't even know it. Now, what was going on is it's amazing how powerful the brain is. In order to experience pain, you have to be conscious of it. And when you're paying attention to something else that is really compelling, then you're not conscious of something else that's happening to you. So that's the reason, one of the reasons we think this works. It also works with chronic pain. And it turns out that people, once they've had a treatment with VR and chronic pain, they are able to remember it. They use that image in their mind because they remember they didn't have any pain then. And then they go back to that world in their mind, and that reduces the pain. Rheumatoid arthritis, many of these areas that where it can have a treatment. So in terms of stress, again, we put people into a peaceful world. Turns out there's a new organization in the National Institute of Health called psychoneuroimmunology. And this department has to do with healing in the mind. This is back to my healing from the inside out. And one of the things they have discovered is the high correlation between stress and cancer, and especially in recovery from breast cancer for women, that there's such a high correlation. If these women are stressed, there'll be a recurrence. Now, when you put them in a virtual world and they're calming down and going to these beautiful places that you would, when you're in the hospital, it's sort of difficult to do that. And there's several companies that are working on this. One of them is Virtual Therapeutics is using VR as a means of de-stressing patients so that the healing can take place. So that, I don't know if that answered the question, but it turns out it all has to do with the mind and how the mind affects the way we experience things, including pain, stress, so forth.
And so there's another question that's asking for the slides that you made. So right now I'm going to paste the email that Tom Furness's email into the chat. So if you have any other questions, or if you want to reach out to him to ask about a few of the links he mentioned or slides, this is the email for that. So it's in the Zoom chat now. And another question is, so out of all the products you've worked on involving VR, which one has to be your favorite?
Oh, gosh. Oh, wow. Well, I guess I would say the one that was the most thrilling was the first one. I showed you that big Darth Vader headset, right? And so here it is. We had, in order to get that to work, we had to have 8 VAX computers. This is back, in the early 80s. We had to have 8 VAX computers, 2 other PDP-11s. We had an Evans Sutherland picture system draw the left eye and another Evans Sutherland picture system draw the right eye. 2 PDP-11s that drove those. And then all of this. I mean, this is room full of computers to do it. And this is in the olden days when there were plenum floors and things like that. That's when you knew computers were computers, when there's air blowing through them and everything to keep them cool and so forth. So, so everything had come together. The headset was there. It had a negator screen assembly because the thing weighed 10 pounds. And so you had to reduce the weight on that. And we had the tracking system working. Everything was hooked up. We had the graphics working, the calligraphics, the vector graphics part that you saw in the movie. And so it came time for me we're going to turn it on, the complete system. And so the guys have been working on this, and they've probably seen this before, but here I was sitting in the cockpit, in our cockpit simulator, and they lowered this helmet on my head. Okay. And we went through an enrollment system, having to do with the voice recognition and things like that. And so they switched it on. And this picture opens up to me. This huge picture that is interactive as I looked around. And I about crapped in my pants, I have to say. It was so unbelievable that it took my breath away. And I thought, oh my goodness. I knew it was going to be pretty neat. I had no idea the power of it, because it's like somebody reached out of the display and pulled me inside. Now I wasn't looking at a picture anymore. I was in a place. Switch went off in my head. And that was probably, that first time saying, oh gosh, this is unbelievable, this technology. And that's before anybody had done it, and had this kind of performance.
All right, so it's been great seeing all the questions from the audience, but I think since we're almost 20 minutes over at this point, I think I'll end on, I think I'm going to do one more question from the audience, and then I'll hand the last question over to Melinda. So someone's asking about recommending some introductory AR/VR lectures, and just I guess I'm going to expand upon that question. Just what would be your advice for beginners trying to get involved in the field?
Okay, really another good question. Certainly, there are some amazing books out there. I would recommend Jaron Lanier's book. It tells you a lot of good history about as a matter of fact, he's the one who gave the name virtual reality. Good friend of mine. But just go into. There also is another good, several good textbooks about this. I probably ought to post a list about it. But there are lectures been given and online by various people who are running these laboratories. Certainly, if you go to Mark Billinghurst, if you Google on Mark Billinghurst, his SlideShare, you'll find a number of lectures that he's done with augmented reality. You'll find some that I've done. There are, the University of North Carolina has a number of these things. But if you're looking for a primer in virtual reality, there are some of those in SlideShare. It explains how all this works and can be supplemented by books. We are thinking about a master class that we teach in virtual reality, not only the technology and its history, but also the how to do it and how to build it, how to build the hardware and the software and the worlds. We're thinking about doing a series of master classes and through the Virtual World Society on that, and collecting the best from all of those guys that you saw in the pictures before. And And so that's what I would recommend, is that start off with SlideShare and with some good books like Jaron's book, and you can learn a lot about it.
Sounds great. So I actually have one closing question of my own. So how do you recommend high schoolers get involved in the world of AR and VR to look forward and sort of discover how they can make an impact on the world?
Well, Melinda, you're already doing it. I mean, you're doing it from the AI standpoint. I mean, I think people really want to help. The fact that you've gotten all these amazing speakers is a credit to you, that people really do want to help. And all you need to do is ask. And what I would say, the best way to get started is to do three things. One is start your own club in your school. Start a VR club. Get with your teachers. Find out if there's some assets that you can use. Get some headsets in there. You know, you can get them sort of cheap nowadays. And start attending some meetups and some hackathons. Maybe even sponsor some of your own. And that's where I've seen for high schoolers especially, to really get something started, is just start a club yourself, like you guys have done with the AI lab. But again, the place that's so exciting nowadays, although with the pandemic it's not too much happening, is with these so-called VR hackathons. And this is amazing. One of the last ones, not the last one, but one of the near the last ones we had in Seattle, there were about 350 people who came to this. You know, about 300 hackers. It's amazing how this happens, because these people, the first night, you know, they have something like, you know, 15 seconds to say what they want to do, you know, with the VR. And these are people that show up for this, are people that work in Microsoft and Google and Amazon and the big companies, you know, and they hate their jobs and they just want to do VR. And so they line up, and after 15 seconds, they'll say, oh, okay. One guy says, well, I'm a C++ programmer and I want to build a world that sort of does this kind of thing. And the next guy shows up and said, well, actually, I'm a composer. I write music, and what I'd like to do is write music for a VR experience. Another one says, well, actually, I'm actually a musician, and I would like to play music, record music for this. Another one will say, well, I'm a graphics designer. Another one will say, I'm a teacher. Another one will say, I know nothing. I just want to do it because it's so cool. And so what happens in the course of the next hour or two, these people get together. It's magic. They get together and form these teams, 7, 8, 10, whatever, and to start deciding on what world they're going to build. And then 48 hours later, they have this amazing world. And everybody in that group loves each other. They become friends. Many of them started companies saying, hey, we want to take this on to the marketplace. And the beauty of it is the interdisciplinary part of it, and having these different people working together. It's so fun to create something. And again, that's back to our magic powers of imagination, creativity, to go build these worlds with other people and solve problems. I mean, one of the ones we did was we had a person from the Center for Disease Control come and talk to the group about communicable diseases carried by mosquitoes. And as a result of that, all these worlds appeared that would help solve that problem. It's amazing what we have, the capability we have working together to solve problems. And so that's a good place to meet people and to learn skills and ask people that you know are working in this if they would spend time with you to teach you. But nothing helps doing it, and just getting started on your own, and you'll learn it. And you ask for help, you'll get it.
Thank you. Definitely a strong concluding message from Dr. Furness on how people, the audience out there, if you're a high schooler, how you can move forward and sort of progress into this world of VR. Just a quick reminder, I noticed that there are still a lot of questions in the Q&A. So if you have your questions still unanswered, you can email Tom Furness at the email that I'm again going to copy and paste into the chat below. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tom Furness, for giving an amazing talk, and thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all.